Good afternoon. Welcome to the weekly edition of The Wrap. I'm Laura Leslie, WRAL Capitol Bureau Chief.
And I'm Travis Fain, one of WRAL's State House reporters.
And it's another crazy week. I feel like we say that every week, but this session, it kind of has been. It's sort of been at a dead run since they came into town, I think.
Yeah, we got a new elections bill this week. We had movement on gambling, sports gambling. We had talk of casinos coming into a bill dropping eventually, maybe. Medical marijuana move, just kind of a lot going on, as usual.
It's been a lot. So let's start with the elections bill, because that just dropped last night. And that is, or yesterday afternoon, I should say. This is Friday. We're recording this. So the elections bill is about 16 pages, and it includes a lot of fairly technical changes to things like staffing, poll observers, et cetera. But kind of the major changes that it makes are things like, what they've been trying to do for a while, which is have the elections, have mail-in ballots have to be received by election day evening in order to count. That's one that they've tried before and gotten vetoed. And then some changes that are kind of new, having to do with how same-day voter registrations are handled. And also signature matching, which is something that the NCGOP actually petitioned to have done last year. And the state Board of Elections on a party line vote denied them that. And then the courts sided with the Board of Elections on that. So they're just going to put that into law. And that's got its own problems associated with it. But, it's a way to try to make, it's more secure, they say. And then I think what was the last one I was thinking of? Sorry.
There's a ban, I believe, on
outside money.
Outside money. So like where Mark Zuckerberg's foundation back during the pandemic gave a bunch of money to various boards of elections, say, hey, go buy, whatever you need to do an election during the pandemic.
Right.
They're going to outlaw that because, the idea of private money going toward, because you might pick a county that you wanted to help run its election. You might not pick this other county, and I think that's the idea there.
This just got filed, and so it's going to show up in committee sometime next week probably. We don't know exactly when, and keep in mind the PCS that shows up in committee may be different than this. So all we're dealing with right now is the bill as filed.
Well, and this is the Senate version,
right?
There was some talk. House bill writers were saying, "Hey, we'll probably have a bill in 3 weeks. We don't know if it will be a House Senate bill or just a House bill." So it's entirely possible that there's going to be a Senate bill and then a separate House bill, and then we go through the normal process.
Anyway, so this did start in the Senate. They did not do a gut and amend, which surprised me a little bit. So it's going to have to go all the way through the Senate and the House. But one thing that we got a tip about who might have been contributing to this is something Will Doran wrote a lot about this week on NC Capitol. You should go read. Is a former Trump attorney, Cleta Mitchell, who is now in North Carolina with her North Carolina election integrity team. And apparently we got some documentation from that group that showed that she and Jim Womack, who is another head of the group, had met with Senator Ralph Hayes and Senator Warren Daniel, I believe. Those are a couple of the chairs of Senate elections and the sponsors behind the bill. Now, they say that, or Hayes at least says that they didn't have any impact on the bill, but there are certainly some things in the bill that were also things that the NCEIT was pushing for. So Will Doran, as I say, will have a longer story on that today, so check that out online.
Yeah, and I mean, what exactly their input was, I don't know. A lot of people meet, but I mean, anytime someone who just continually says the 2020 election was stolen is meeting with legislators who are ultimately writing an elections bill, that certainly is worth noting.
So other stuff that happened this week, we should back up for a second to medical marijuana. That got its vote this week and should be on the way. It's on the way to the governor, is it not? Yeah, it's on the way to the governor right now, isn't it? No.
I thought it just was up for discussion, but boy, we should have talked about that earlier.
Wait. Okay, no. I'm sorry. I'm thinking casinos. Gambling. Gambling is on its way to the governor. Medical marijuana is not.
That's right.
Sorry about that. It's like we said, it's been a lot this week. So medical marijuana, yes, it got its first hearing in the House Health Committee, I think it was. Did not get a vote yet, but could.
Yeah, and I mean, we still don't know kind of what the numbers are, but I'm assuming this is going to move this year. We'll see what sort of changes. Senator Bill Rabin, who is a cancer survivor and a big believer in this, and the sponsor of the bill, told a really personal story about, treatment for stage 3 colon cancer, and how marijuana was the only thing that he could find to ease his nausea from the chemotherapy drugs, and then it worked immediately. And there was also and I don't know that I'd have told that moment where he said he had gone to local law enforcement. This is years and years ago. I think he was in his 40s.
I think this is the first time I've ever heard him tell a story.
Absolutely. And he said So he was talking to, I can't remember if it was a police chief or a sheriff's. Anyway, he was basically saying, "Boy, it would be nice if I could smoke weed. I'm worried though."
Yeah, he said, "I'm going to have to buy it illegally."
Yeah, and I'm a veterinarian. I could lose my license. And then did he say that it just started showing up in his mailbox?
Yeah, it started showing up in his mailbox. Yeah. So, that's good. Anyway, I guess that's what happens when you're Bill Rabin, I guess.
I guess.
This was before he was in office, though, at least as far as
I feel like we may have moved on from that too fast. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a it did what now kind of moment. Who put it there? But
Well, yeah, there were some people on the committee, some House members, who sounded like they were not necessarily behind this. And of course, there's a lot of pushback from social conservatives, namely the Family Policy Council, NC Values Coalition, et cetera.
yeah, and I'll just read a quote from Rabin. He says, "The only reason I'm alive today, no science behind that, but I can tell you, I know there are tens of thousands of people in the state who can benefit from it just like I did." So it's obviously there's a real emotional aspect to medical marijuana, and will be as we go forward.
And we'll be watching for that to show up in committee again this coming week. In the meantime, we should go back to gambling. Okay, I called it casinos, but it's not. It's sports betting. It is sports betting on your phone and possibly some books, some sports books.
Lounges connected to sporting venues, basically.
Major sporting venues, yeah. So there was some talk earlier this week when it first went through the Senate that the House might want to add casinos and VLTs to it. VLTs are video lottery terminals. You might remember Harry Warren had that bill last week that got a hearing but not a vote. And House Commerce, I think that was. But it sounds like as of yesterday, Moore kind of walked that back and said it sounds like it's going to be a done deal. So it will be on its way to the governor as soon as the House signs off on the Senate's changes. And I think we're pretty much expecting the governor to sign it, are we not?
On sports gambling? Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then the question becomes, all right, do we also do video lottery terminals? Do we do a basically digital version of the state lottery and authorize that, which would be kind of very similar to video poker, which
Yeah.
the state has tried to outlaw over and over and over again with some and somewhat limited success. Do we just say, all right, we're gonna just heavily regulate this and have it? And does that bill have an element where we authorize 3 or 4 casinos in the state, in, say, Rockingham County, Anson County, Nash County? There was a study that our colleague Brian Murphy has written about that kind of suggesting the economic benefits of authorizing some casinos off of tribal lands and in certain districts. Rockingham County, Senator Phil Berger is from Rockingham County, most powerful man probably in the General Assembly. And he's kind of like, we need to talk about that because there is a casino in Virginia.
Right across the border up in Danville.
Right across the border up in Danville. And he said, someone told me a lot of North Carolina license plates in there. So they see money going out of state.
Sure.
And they see a way to make the money stay in state.
But of course, the same arguments kind of apply. We did hear in the Senate this week. I mean, the vote for the sports gambling bill was bipartisan, but but there were also people on both sides who were opposed to it. And one of the concerns is that it may, in fact, increase lottery gambling addiction because you're going to be able to do it to basically gamble 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on your phone if you want to. Also, they're going to allow micro betting, which is those little bets that you can make during a game. So-and-so is going to get so many free throws, or the final score is going to be X, or so-and-so is going to be ejected, or whatever. And so you can really rack up some debt pretty quick.
Right. And so, we've thrown a lot at people on gambling here. So the sports gambling bill, that's moving. That looks like it's close to a done deal. Casinos and video lottery terminals, there's no bill that has been filed that I know of. We expect one to come. These two things might be combined, and it's not something that I would dismiss like, oh, that'll never happen. No, that might happen. The question is, or one of the questions is, though, do we really does this legislature really have the appetite to do all these things on gambling right now in this year? I don't know on that. Just real quickly, Bob Hall, formerly with Democracy Now!, he's kind of
Speaking of this,
he's one of the great watchdogs of North Carolina politics. He filed a complaint with the State Board of Elections this week alleging that the video poker industry that we mentioned a minute ago illegally gave $885,000 to various political candidates and committees from 2019 to 2022. The North Carolina Coin Operators Association was who we fingered on that. They did not comment for our story. You can read more about that online.
What was interesting about it is not just what they gave, but when. That they were able to give it sort of at the very end of election cycles, so it would not be reported for months. But it was much appreciated by the candidates that got it. So
That's a lot of money too.
it is a lot of money, and basically, you're not allowed to bundle. But if you just tell a whole bunch of people to give individual checks, it's kind of the same thing. Anyway, so that is under investigation, we assume, by the State Board of Elections. They're not allowed to say that anymore because they're not allowed to tell you what they're investigating. But that's why Bob always lets us know when he's dropping off a complaint.
The Blue Cross Blue Shield bill that we've talked about a few times is done. It has passed both chambers, sitting on the governor's desk. I fully expect him to sign it. We're recording this Friday, 1:40 p.m. He has not yet signed it, but I do expect that to come. Interesting that it was done despite the Attorney General, Josh Stein, saying he wanted some amendments. I don't know that I ever heard Stein say he was against the bill.
Yeah, well, I think the talk that I've heard is the amendments could come in the technical corrections bill. And so I think that's what people are holding out hopes for, that'll be fixed in retrospect. But I think the bill takes effect pretty immediately.
Bill takes effect immediately, yeah. So it'll be interesting to see, does anything happen, Blue Cross Blue Shield, with its new ability to kind of buy other companies and move money around without the approvals they have to get now? Do they take advantage of that in the media? And I'll believe the technical corrections thing when I see it. Dale Folwell, state treasurer, was also against it. Mike Causey, the state
Department of Insurance
commissioner, also against it, vehemently against it. So that's just kind of interesting because it moved easily bipartisanly, not so easily through the House, much easier through the Senate, 41-5 in the state Senate. So that's a big time vote.
Another bill moving this week was the DEI bill. There's a couple of versions of this going around, but essentially the initial version of it would just sort of prohibit, if you're interviewing for a state job, they couldn't ask you, if what your opinions about politics or current issues or yada yada are, right? And it would not allow state employee trainers to talk about things like critical race theory. But it's gotten wider in the House. And right now it's wide enough that basically Abe Jones, who he's kind of laughing, although he wasn't really joking. He says, I ought to say thank you because I'm an employment lawyer and you're giving me all the business I can stand. Because he's like, this is going to be so much litigation because the thing, like, it's so vague that basically if you say you went to work, you wanted to go to work for DEQ at cutting carbon, emissions, they wouldn't even be able to ask you, do you believe in global warming?
Yeah, it's one of these things where you're trying to get rid of a certain type of behavior.
Right.
But you can't just say you can't do this behavior. You have to write it in a way where it then becomes just based on the words. If you don't have further context, you don't really know what anyone's trying to get at. So it's a tough need. I put it this way, 72-46 party line vote in the House, Democrats against, Republicans for. It's going to go back to the Senate, which had approved, as you said, a narrower version. But, this is going to become law, and then I guess the courts will determine what it actually does.
Yeah, this thing's going to be in the courts for a long time, I have a feeling.
And not only that, but individual hiring managers will have to figure out, well, what does this mean? Does it change anything about my process? Does it change things about the questions that I put on applications? Because a lot of times on a job application, you'll see, do you think diversity is important in a community?
And they can't ask that.
And of course, no one is putting that on a job application and thinking this person will say no, and that's a good thing. I want them to say no on this. So it's clearly a pushback against that sort of thing. And I guess that will change some job applications.
You've been tracking this boards and commissions bill for a while now, and this thing has gone through the Senate. It's now in the House. They've made some changes to it. But what do you think is the main changes that the Senate is not going to agree to?
All right, so this is Senate Bill 512, which takes some appointments away from the governor on 9 key boards. Well, 8 key boards in the House.
Keyboards, not keyboards, yeah.
Yeah, 8 in the House because the House dropped the Utilities Commission language. So the Senate wanted to expand the State Utilities Commission, which regulates Duke Energy, sets energy rates, up to 9, and take, I believe, 2 of the appointments for themselves, if I remember that correctly. House hasn't done that. That's something they're going to talk about, the House and the Senate. And I expect some sort of Utilities Commission language to come back in. The Speaker of the House has said that's what's going to happen. The House also tinkered with the way the Board of Transportation gets done. The Senate had tinkered with it as well. But the House made it so that the Board of Transportation, if you're a member of that board right now, your term is over June 30th. So you're about to be off the board if this passes. Senate appears to be on board with that. And so it's just a hard reset for the Board of Transportation. The House also wants the Board of Governors, which regulates the university system, to go from 24 members to 28 members. Senate is not on board with that.
Didn't they just cut that?
They went from 32 to to 24.
Right.
And Speaker of the House Tim Moore said, hey, we want to split the difference and go to 28. But that doesn't look like it will be a point of contention. Of course, the governor is against this. Democrats are against
Well,
this.
the governor would be. I mean, the governor's losing his ability to appoint the majority on a whole bunch of major executive commissions that set
I think he still has the majority on most of the 9, but it does shift it a lot.
Well,
it changes a lot of things.
Yeah, and in some cases, what happens is he and legislators would have even number of appointees, and then a different official, a different
like the commissioner of agriculture,
commissioner of agriculture, or commissioner of insurance, or the state treasurer would have the deciding the 9. So.
Yeah, and I mean, look, we've been back and forth about separation of powers in this state. This will also spark a lawsuit. So
yeah, this is definitely going to court. I mean, it's like an arrow. So, yep. This week we, pardon me. This week we saw the mental health $1 billion package from Donnie Lambeth showed up in committee. He had talked about this previously when he first introduced it. I guess it was last month, end of April actually. It would take some ARPA money, and he was talking about using the bonus money from Medicaid initially. The bonus that we were
and I don't know, that may be the same money. Was the bonus money for Medicaid part of the American Rescue Plan bill?
I'm not sure.
I can't remember. So it may be the same money.
It could be. But anyway, that is on the move. And it looks like, obviously with Donnie Lambeth behind it, it looks like it's probably got legs.
Yeah, House Bill 855, if you want to follow that one. It's about 5 pages. There is some new solar language in the natural gas bill. So for a while now, there's been a bill that says, okay, localities, you can't forbid builders from putting natural gas appliances into houses. It's been a little controversial, but not
in North Carolina.
Not super controversial.
No, I mean, it was a thing in California, and it made it big on right-wing media, and that's what happened.
Sure, yeah. But so that bill is moving forward, but some language has been added to it. Republican lawmakers have been talking for a while about needing to set some rules around the decommissioning of solar facilities. So you put solar panels in a field. All right, well, what happens 30 years later? What do we do with this stuff? So that language is now tied into the, I believe it's House Bill 130, into the natural gas ban bill. Looks like that's going to become law. The League of Municipalities is not fighting this. They
worked it out with the solar industry as well. So
yeah, and the solar industry is on board. So I think there's some Democrats that have some heartburn on that bill, but we'll see. It looks like that one's going to move forward, and which brings us, I think, to the Farm Bill.
The Farm Bill. When this is always big, there's always a lot of discussion about this. The House and Senate always have real different priorities on it, so no surprise that this year is just about the same. One version that we've seen has, this is really interesting to me, it would basically require the state veterinary board to give veterinarians a week notice before coming to inspect their facilities. Yeah. Can you imagine if that was the rule for hospitals or restaurants?
Well, so what Senator Brent Jackson told me about that is that's standard practice now at the Department of Labor for routine workplace inspections. I haven't reached out to the Department of Labor.
That seems like a problem.
Apparently, in some cases, they can still do a surprise inspection, but this is... Yeah, a week's written notice for veterinarians. Muscadine, grape juice encouraged to be available in schools.
Well, remember, it was originally going to be required.
It was originally going to be required.
Yeah, now they're just encouraging it.
Just encouraging it. There's some hog farm language in there that had concerned some environmentalists. That has been addressed. So you could, if you're wanting to collect methane from an open pit of hog waste, you can tint it and pump it over to someone who's going to burn it for electricity. This will allow you to flare it for a little while because the pipeline isn't there yet. It was going to allow flaring just basically in perpetuity. No set limit now. A 6-month limit has been added there. There's some concern, though, about wetlands rulings. There was a big U.S. Supreme Court case that rolled back some federal wetlands protections.
Right.
This bill kind of combines with that. It says, hey, North Carolina will not have rules on this that are stricter than the federal rule. So because
That's a partisan amendment, yeah.
The Supreme Court is rolling this thing back that is probably going to open hundreds of thousands of acres of land to development, which could exacerbate some flooding issues. So the environmentalists against that, builders, they're
very much in favor.
And that seems to be moving forward.
We want to go back to revisit a story we did last week, which was about things that were said on the floor of the House. Joe John this week, not by name, basically calling on Keith Kidwell to apologize for what he said to Diamond State and Williams. He made the crack about the Satanic Church of Satan, I guess it was.
Yeah, she was talking about her experience with an abortion and how she kind of leaned on her church and religion, and he at the back of the room said, well, it must be the Church of Satan.
Well, anyway, John sort of called him, like I said, everything but by name. Said, this should be happening. You should apologize. You spoke with Kidwell after the fact, and
I would say I spoke to him. I wouldn't say I spoke with him because I said, hey, do you want to respond to this? He turned to me and looked at me with some disdain, said one sentence to another lawmaker that was there, turned around and walked away without recognizing that I, another human being, had spoken to him. I put him down for no comment on that one.
Yeah.
So I do not expect an apology to be forthcoming as Representative John had requested. That was my takeaway from that.
On the other side of things, for people who are being very forthcoming, Roy Cooper has an ad. Roy Cooper for North Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, that's his governor's committee that is, it's not defunct. He's still using it to raise money.
I suppose. For what? Well, anyway.
Help Democrats, I'm guessing for now, but we'll see.
Anyway, so this is an ad that we don't know yet if it's for TV or online.
Oh,
right?
I do. Okay, so they cut a 30-second ad. I saw it online. Morgan Jackson, who is Cooper's political consultant, says they're running it on cable stations. And it's the governor saying things along the lines he's been saying at this tour of schools he's doing on education funding, that Republicans are going to choke the life out of public education. Millionaires are getting a massive tax cut, opportunity scholarships, the amount of raises are shameful. And so, you should see that on some cable TV and probably on Facebook and stuff like that.
And you've been keeping track of who's all running for what. And we know that Representative Jeffrey Elmore, long time representative at the legislature, is going to be will not be running for re-election because he'll be running for lieutenant governor.
He's going to run for lieutenant governor. I believe he is, or has been at least, the only teacher in the General Assembly. That may have changed last election cycle.
Well, Republican teacher, I think.
At least Republican, yeah. Rockingham County Sheriff Sam Page is also going to run for lieutenant governor.
Another familiar name, yeah.
Yeah, Page has a kind of statewide purview, not purview, but I mean he's known because he co-chaired President Donald Trump's 2020 re-election campaign here in North Carolina. Michael Bitzer, political scientist extraordinaire over at Catawba College.
Who tracks all this crap so we don't have to, right?
Yeah, he's got a spreadsheet. 6 Democrats, 7 Republicans who are either rumored or announced for lieutenant governor, including these two. So Elmore and Sam Page getting into that race for the Republicans, which brings us to next week.
So no votes Monday in the House or the Senate. Looks like they're going to take that day off. Although we should note that in the background, we are still having serious negotiations over the budget bill. And that's what they've spent most of the weekend doing is what I'm being told they're going to do. And it's not going as well as they were hoping. But Senator Berger said yesterday he's still hopeful that they can be done at the end of June. We'll see. Anyway, so votes in the House Tuesday, Wednesday, and maybe Thursday. And then in the Senate, of course, they will have votes, and we'll be looking for that elections bill.
Yeah, that'll be in committee, I assume, early in the week, earlier rather than later.
And I would think on Tuesday and Wednesday, the House is expected to give the final yes to the sports gambling bill before it heads over to Cooper.
That makes sense.
So that is what we'll be watching for next week, and, of course, the budget. And thanks for joining us here on The Wrap.